these universities can tell when they're using AI.
Oh, they have like the filter. Here's the thing, the little dirty secret is that the kids have it too. So they can test their own work to see if it is going to pop as AI enhanced, and then they'll go in and bust up some sentences. But the thing is, Grammarly's okay. But then I think, what is okay? And what is a deficit? Because we all, the parents and the adults, are like, that's not fair. That is cheating. Which is absolutely how I feel. Because I'm like, my kid's not going to learn anything.
Today's guest is one of the sharpest minds at the intersection of content, commerce, and community, Samantha Skey, CEO of She Media. Part of the Penske media empire, which includes brands like Rolling Stone, Billboard, Variety, and of course, She Media, this is a media company that reaches hundreds of millions of people through digital, live, and experiential platforms, shaping culture, creating economic value, and driving conversations. She Media reaches 88 million women each month and represents a new breed of media business, mission-driven, audience-first, and commercially agile. Samantha has led She Media through a major evolution, championing independent creators, innovating around women's health, and rethinking the economics of digital media. She joined She Media, then She Knows, in 2013 and became CEO from a CRO position, by the way, which we love here at Revenue Room Connect, when Penske Media acquired the company in 2018. Samantha, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited for our discussion.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to see you again.
So, you have a really interesting career path, and it's actually not just through all of the roles you've had, but it's something we're exploring a lot more at Revenue Connect, which is female leadership that rises up through the CRO. Let's call it the revenue function. Can you give us your playbook, like how you are, like what you the steps you went through and where you are today?
Oh, I love the concept that I have a playbook, but I will pretend and strategic planning for life. I do lots of strat planning within my business, but for myself, I'd say it always feels like I lean hard into the things that I tend to either be good at or areas where I see results. And for me, that continued to be in bringing products to market and finding the right connection between supply and demand, so AKA marketing and sales, and transacting, maintaining relationships, trying always to improve products as you watch the market. And I think for me, it's always been useful, and I'd say actually essential within media or ad tech or SaaS models to be reacting in real time to the market. And that's why I think people in the revenue space are at an advantage almost, because you're not making products in the back lab, at least again within media, social platforms, etc. You are reacting real time to market conditions and figuring out what your place is, and being as agile as possible. So whether I started in the literary world as an international literary scout assistant, and then moved into the internet, which at the time I was with head-to-head gaming, and just did anything that needed doing, which again, eventually, pretty quickly, I guess, ended up in sales, because I was able to describe the product, find the people who wanted um, something that we could solve to. And there were no sellers at the time in digital. It was 1995. And so there were like 2 buyers and, probably 20 sellers in New York. And I was moved to CNET then. And, it became a real asset to be in a business that was developing, and where there were so few people with experience. So I guess that, if anything, I'd say leaning into areas that are new and novel, where there is some kind of innovation, so you can develop competency, and then instead of growing by small increments, really try to grow swiftly. That's probably been part of my inadvertent playbook.
You're the second woman I've spoken to this week that actually had a career in a gaming company.
Interesting. It's such good training. It's such good training in general because those are fanatical consumers, and maintaining engagement is such a good, it's such a good learning experience.
Well, I actually was at Sega in San Francisco in early my career as well. So now I guess we're three. But the gaming industry, people don't realize how far ahead of the curve they were, understanding, user behavior. It
Yes,
was like, you
totally.
know,
And you had so many things you could watch in digital and just interactive games because you're watching people choose one path over another, or go hard for one thing, or bet on one thing or another in real time. So there's just this incredible wealth of data. And then I even think just figuring out, in the 90s, how to take that consumer data when we didn't have data scientists, at least in my organizations, and what was the most meaningful information, like what did you listen to, and how do you kind of decide how to optimize the product based on that data. So that's absolutely true. For CRM, I feel like gaming is such a good platform of training.
absolutely. And you also bring up agility and also finding the new, taking the risk to go into a new area that others aren't sitting pretty in. And digital was new frontier. So I would think for anyone listening to this today, I would, lean hard into AI. Right.
Exactly. Exactly. I keep
Like,
saying this to people who like want to go into media, who I, speak to as, interviews, or because like they're kids who reach out on LinkedIn who are graduating, and they're like, I really want to go into media. And I'm like, dude, don't do it.
mm,
Like, unless you're going in with an eye towards, what publishing 3.0 and content consumption is going to look like, I would not get a journalism degree. I hate to say it, which is a great
yeah. No,
choice.
it's going to be a reimagination of
Mhm.
all of, actually not just a reimagination, a new imagination for these new roles, and one of the, I was, on another podcast I was on the other day, I truly believe there's going to be an entire new sector that's going to evolve around the authenticity
Yes.
of what we're seeing, what we're listening to, what we're reading, because it's so easy to fake it with AI.
What do you think? Because I'm totally with you, and watching it from different angles, including like as a mom of a teen, and I'm watching it, meaning the impact of AI solutions and platforms, which are freaking great. And I love, I mean, I could go deep down that rabbit hole on Perplexity,
Mhm.
my favorites, or ChatGPT, of course. But how do you think that'll work? The authenticity. Do you have any ideas on like how that's going to go down? Because would it be verification? Would it be algorithmically determined? What do you think will be important? I'm
Well,
just
I think I use the analogy of Taylor Swift suing someone over using her tooth in a photo. Like, how the
wait,
heck?
wait. She did that. Her too.
I mean, I'm making it up a little
Oh,
bit, but
oh,
there was
okay.
a story. It's like one small, it was like her lips or something,
Oh my
but
gosh.
but it's like the music industry for years has been able to say, you took my lyrics, even though they're slightly changed, or the tune. Like, it's intellectual property. So how do we now put this into the digital frontier of identifying what is legitimately someone's own creative product versus something that is produced by ChatGPT? But I think it needs to go farther. Which is even like voice recognition, or
Mhm.
when a photo's been altered. I saw this terrifying show on Netflix about these women who were scammed, like
Mhm.
catfished, but it was the
Yeah.
same, looked like the same person, but in essence it was this network of, they call them Yahoo boys out of Nigeria,
Oh my
that
gosh.
literally scraped this poor makeup artist profile, all of his social media, including videos of him walking the dog, being in the hospital.
Oh my God.
So they were able to not only come up with these stories with these photos, they were able to FaceTime utilizing this video and super. I mean,
That's just so just even just as hearing you describe it, it feels so personally invasive and
yeah.
freaky and like haunting to see yourself being. It's one thing to see yourself misrepresented through a a static image, but Wow, I mean, it's just so jarring. And I think that authenticity will matter in some areas more than others. Like you
Yeah.
said, voice and identity. But then where I get worried is like, what about aggregate information, which we've already been doing through Google. And now Google doesn't want to send the traffic to the publisher,
Yeah.
which is killing all of us. They can, condense it into an AI paragraph. So the publishers from whom they're pulling are not getting any monetizable, you know, offshoot. So,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, when it comes to like recipes or entertainment news, I don't think that there's going to be as much urgency around authenticity. So a lot of people will not make a living who used to make a living off of publishing. I think when you get into the like, even though that is IP, I just don't know that that will be prioritized as highly as some of the misrepresentation of a human, which is
Yeah.
you're using AI differently. When you're using it to aggregate information, which is different than the music experience, because the IP is so hard to tease out because it's
Yeah.
like 50 of us. So that's where I worry about publishing. But yeah, I completely agree with you that there will be some degree of there will be a whole new industry around what's real or what's real. What does real mean? And how do we understand a source of something of content? Does it even matter if we do the research ourselves? I don't know. There's so much there.
So I think there's some really important aspects on the business side, and I mean one is the monetization model, right? And there
Mhm.
is no AI doesn't exist unless you have this content.
Right.
And the deeper the content, the more powerful it is, which is why niche media or industry specific, they're in a much better spot than news
Yes.
organizations.
Yep.
Um, but if these entities can't exist, then AI can't exist. So somehow a new revenue model needs to materialize.
Mm.
And we had a speaker at our event. It's a person you should meet by the name. His name is Lucky Gunasakara. He is the CEO of it's a tech platform called Miso, but he is incredibly passionate about the protection of intellectual property for media companies, and he speaks all over.
Good for him. I'd
But
love to meet him. We need more of these people in a room.
yeah, absolutely. He and I chatted on stage about why aren't media companies being compensated, a la a music model? Like every
Right.
time your content is utilized in a query or in results, which these platforms know, you get paid a royalty.
Right. 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 What do you say?
He loves that idea. Everyone else is like, well, how does that work?
It's hard. It's hard. Yeah. And it's kind of, yeah, I mean, that would be the ideal. And that's Google does some version of that. Facebook does some version of that. They're kind of hacked. And now that the way that the product works doesn't require you to compensate because you're not, well, or to produce a compensatable asset for the publisher, meaning traffic. So you can, and you're not getting like brand exposure because again, it's an aggregate. Perplexity does show the sources at the top when you're asking a question. They'll sort of run across the top, which is useful. I just like that as a consumer because some of them, if you ask a pretty obscure question, you're ending up on like you're getting like Reddit information aggregated.
Right,
So, I mean, that would be the logical. It's just, there's just no way to track it, which means it would be charitable. Like we could turn off Google's access to our content if we wanted to. Publishers could. We could choose not to use Facebook as distro. You can't shut yourself off from,
right.
or I don't know how to do it if you can. And so all those cease and desist notes that have gone to that the New York Times and Wall Street Journal are sending out to the AI platforms. I just, you're totally right. It has to be a new economic model. I just think the only way I can think of is that you lock it down and like you lock your content down. It's subscription only that you can still get access to that as an AI crawl. Yeah, there's a lot. I have to learn a lot. I need to take some classes.
Yeah, I think the subscription model has its pluses and lots of minuses,
Yeah.
and that is even just one. I think there's subscription overload.
Yeah.
Like if
No,
someone asks me to pay for one more thing, I'm just like, I
I
can't. Like,
know, and we don't know what we want. I totally agree with you. Subscription sounds very like 1988 to me.
yep,
But I also
yep,
am trying to think of how you, to your point, the niches are kind of okay, or the publication that is directly from an individual. Like if you follow Scott Galloway or Kara Swisher because you trust that person, I think they're going to be okay. Because to your point, and this has happened to Scott Galloway, if you imitate the human and really take their personal IP and DNA. I think that's going to be probably a more significant crime
right.
than taking lines from a piece I wrote. I'm not lines in music, but taking paragraphs from my own reporting. And so I think that if you follow the individual and care deeply about the individual from whom you're receiving the news or the entertainment, that might be kind of protected. But I do think we're getting better content, better solutions faster. And so I don't, to your point, you need the economic model to work, or else the good, rich data is going to stop being researched. Not to mention with defunding research, which is a big pull for AI. I don't know, man. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. No, for sure. And actually, one thing that might be helpful for listeners, because I have a question I want to ask, but it won't make sense until can you describe the business model for She Media? Because it actually is quite interesting. It's not a traditional, like, yes, you have advertising and things like that, but you have a lot of different moving parts in the business in terms of solutions you offer customers and revenue streams.
Yeah, it is. It's a wonderful hybrid of different things I've loved in my career, which is why I hope we work out a reasonable economic model so I can keep doing this with confidence. But we publish our own brands. They're for specific to quote women's lifestyle, meaning it's not we don't do straight news. In the umbrella of women's lifestyle, we have parenting, which is deeply focused on parenting of teens as kind of a space that is so unique and challenging, but also speaks to a transitional phase in the adult's life, or the parents, aunts, whatever, an adult who cares for and is accountable for a or to a teen. That's kind of our space. We also, like, within that context, we'll have loads of like healthy foods and how to entertainment breakdowns, some fashion, a lot of shopping. That's She Knows. With Flow Space, which is really exciting, is our very focused women's health. It's women over 40, women's health over 40, focus on optimization of health span. And our tag or mantra is science and stories for whole life health. That was launched very much as a need that I saw in the market, to actually speak about women who are over 40 and not to expect them to sort of exit stage left, and to recognize that incredible resource we have within the population, women often coming right into their best mental and physical power in many cases. And then just we have so little good brain research, hormone research, etc., on women, because we used small men as the model when endeavoring to do brain heart health research, just only like 50 years ago. So that's a really fun one. That's where you're talking about like niche. I feel like that brand is well protected in the sense that, like you do when it comes to science and health, you kind of want to know your source. Maybe, I mean, plenty of things will be more accessible because of AI, so I'm glad more people will get access to information. But that brand is pretty doing quite well. Then we have Stylecaster, which is all like fashion beauty predictions. That's really run on social and through email. So that's again an easy one because it's built into other things you use, and the email relationship is very much about style casting and deals and things like that. So, and it's led by influencers. So those are the owned and operated. There are some more, but those are kind of three different models. We also represent over 1,000 independent websites. We do not own them. We don't own the IP. We don't employ the writers or the product people, but we monetize through our own ad technology. We monetize those sites not just as display ads, but also larger, more immersive editorial experiences that are sponsored by maybe, a pharmaceutical company or a retail company. And those companies would not, be able to hire like sales teams or, full programmatic practices. So that's like the fun part. It reminds me of being in the literary world or representing artists, because you get to represent these people who decide to publish 18 times a day because they just love their subject matter or they're such experts, but they don't have a big media company through which they're operating. So I love that work. We take a cut, they take a bigger cut, they get a bigger cut. We have low overhead, very low overhead for that business. And you can amass a lot of reach. That's how we get to the 80 million and over 80 million in reach, which allows us to do better segmenting. But so I'd say we monetize the full funnel of consumer engagement in that we have display ads, the top of the funnel. We have then editorial and editorial integration, which is more, really driving a deeper connection and context between a brand and an audience. We have to be judicious there. Like we can't take trashy health products, so we do have an editorial board. And then the bottom, further down the funnel, we are driving commerce, matching consumers to products. And then in that case, we take a cut. Like, so meaning it's a bigger company who's very good at doing the execution on the bottom of the funnel, and they pay us a cut. So there's a lot of, and then we have syndication where Yahoo or Microsoft or others will publish our content and pay us a cut when they publish it. That's like that, to your point, would be lovely if AI worked that way, but AI doesn't need the brand or has chosen not to use the brand name, where big publishers and search vehicles, often like the Yahoos and Microsofts, I think actually want to show the credibility of a brand when they're publishing something, for their users care. So it's all these different ways, all these little, ways to pay for content or generate revenue for other people's content by virtue of having that operational infrastructure. But it's scrappy. Like a lot of us, we acquired BlogHer, a company called Stylecaster, and a company called HelloFlow during my time before we were acquired. And those were all really interesting, different. They all lent different expertise. And, we can't keep everything alive forever, but we have been able to extract strong value from each of those sort of tent poles.
So that's really well, what is you have the diversity of the revenue streams is interesting, but you hit on something that I think I've so Yahoo and they want the brand, right? They because it lends credibility, and if distrust is now starting to come here, and people then it actually may be that these ChatGPT engines and AI engines actually have to then surface brand. So
right.
So there's something. It has to be like a badge of like credibility.
One would hope, that would be that. I don't know though that we have the same filter when we're using AI. I don't know why we don't care about the source, because, even my kids were taught quite a lot about like know the source when they were learning to do research. And now teachers it's a really interesting change. They'll just say, this is the only set of sources you can use. Cause I don't, because otherwise you can write your whole paper in AI, and they probably still can, but work around it.
That's a side note. My daughter's at University of Miami, and she's afraid to use Grammarly for like spelling now because So these universities can tell when they're using AI. So
they have like the filter. Here's the thing: the little dirty secret is that the kids have it too. Have the same apps and filters, so they can test their own work to see if it is going to pop as AI enhanced, and then they'll go in and like bust up some sentences and like make it less good, I guess. So this is the teens, and I'm watching this because we have a teen council of about 90 teens who provide us with all the like, insights that they won't tell their parents, and then we use it as fodder to publish to parents. But it's fascinating. They're like, oh yeah, my teacher has this AI filter, good on her, because I have it too. And I've got the next iteration that's created by some student in, the Ukraine who is, enabling us to the kids or the students, whatever level, to look at what a filter will pick up in terms of AI. It's like it'll give you a percentage, like a percentage likelihood that something appears to be AI driven, or a percentage of the content that's AI enabled. And they then can do a kind of a text mix of sorts that will I don't want to say it makes things incorrect, but it will break the perfection that AI might give you. And Grammarly is really interesting. Like some of them just turn off Grammarly because that is one of the things that, if you've got perfect commas, boom, that's usually. But the thing is, Grammarly is okay. Like I think as a parent, but then I think even wondering what is okay and what is a deficit, because we all, the parents and the adults, are like, that's not fair. That is cheating, which is absolutely how I feel, because I'm like, my kid's not going to learn anything or retain anything.
Mhm.
At the same time, I want to make sure they know how to use these tools, because that's like the only reason I have a job is because I got into something early before people knew about the info webs.
Well, we're I listed all my questions. I might as well just put an X through that because this conversation is going, which is great. I love that. But I love using these tools to help me with like brain blockages or accelerate thinking. But I have the knowledge already
Yes, that's
to
great.
then apply it. Like, and I was thinking about that today, and I almost had to say, like, you know what, I have to stop using it so much because now I'm not thinking anymore.
Yeah, you don't get it's like search, where I would be like, I can't remember something. And that's the other thing though. I do feel like we're like, oh my God, AI, the robots. And it's like we didn't have search when I was a kid. Like we lived through that and social and things that were great big behavior changers. And who knows? I mean, maybe we haven't lived through social. We'll figure that out. But I think that it's not like it's totally new, but I do remember like Google, I started getting so twitchy if I couldn't think of an answer to something like, who was that actor in that movie, that you'd have to look it up, which is so weird. We could not sit with, I think my family started, we had a rule imposed, like you don't get to look anything up at dinner. Is very low bar, but and that you have to like, if it comes to you later, great. If it comes to someone else at the table, great. But you have to sit with that discomfort of like, I don't know the answer. And I think AI, likewise, it'll just atrophy that part of our brain where it's like, how would I phrase that? Or how would I construct that argument? Those helpers are going to make me silly and dumb, I think.
No, for sure. So, how are you well, one is part of a larger, company, Penske Media, which has, just some of the brands. I was actually quite surprised. I own South by Southwest.
Uh-huh. It's
They own
funny.
the,
Yeah, we have, because, our CEO, Jay Penske, is actually really quite young to be a media mogul of the kind he is, I guess. And he started by buying, I think the first buy might have been Deadline, which is just a really insider publication for Hollywood. And then, I won't get the order right here, but then Variety, which is this great legacy. And when we say legacy media, I don't think it's a diss. It's like the legacy of solid, unmatched journalism and integrity, but had kind of like maybe dipped a bit. And Jay is excellent at like returning a brand to a place of great relevance, investing in the edit if that's the thing that matters most. And so then we had Variety, Deadline, then the Hollywood Reporter, the Billboard and Rolling Stone. So really kind of admittedly kind of owning some key niches. And Fairchild Brands, which is Women's Wear Daily, Footwear News, Beauty Inc. We were a weird buy because we're the only consumer buy, like where She Media reaches consumers. In one of our brands, Med Experts, we reach HCP or healthcare professionals, but everything else is to the woman from your kid's school, or the friend from tennis. I don't know. I'm just doing weird examples, but it's consumer, and that's not necessarily the core strength for Penske Media. So we are figuring things out often, in a space of like, there's not someone, a sister publication next door who I can ask how they kind of contended with this challenge. And then events are really big for Penske, and that doesn't
Hmm.
surprise because we have Variety and Rolling Stone. We had Blog Her in our portfolio. And so buying South by Southwest made tons of sense, I thought, and it's been an awesome acquisition. We do just a lot there as She Media and as Flow Space, and it's just wonderful to bring in those communities. We bought it, not surprisingly, during COVID, and have been, there's been a real appetite for that kind of gathering since we had a relative return to normal, and so, or return to convening, and so that is a great, fun, beautiful brand. We just launched
Yeah.
last week, South by UK, so that's happening for the first time.
Who is is it Hunter, or I want to say it's Hunter Thompson, but I know that's an author.
Yeah, no.
No, but the CEO, he spoke at the CISO event I was at on stage, and it was really interesting.
The South by CEO?
The South by Southwest, yeah. Or Chief
Yeah.
Creative Officer.
So it's let me see so Hugh, are you thinking of?
Yes, Hugh. Why did I think Hunter?
Just left. Which is a bummer.
Oh, wow.
I know you heard it here, but and that's a bummer. I think does kind of happen when you have the unbelievable talent of people who create these brands and don't always move forward forevermore. And Penske's done a really surprisingly good job of keeping the founders and sort of earliest thought leaders. Just lost Hugh maybe like 4 months ago, maybe even less.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
and we've had others, but it's those change of hands moments.
Yeah.
Always because I've been in entrepreneurial stuff for all my career. It's always that moment where you hand the transition between kind of the super passionate vision person with the kind of business scale person. That's not always the profile, but it always like hurts my heart a little bit.
Oh, well, again, on a much tinier scale, I know how that is, having sold a brand to that I founded. It was my baby, and I went along because I was so passionate about it and I wanted to see it through.
Yeah.
But I call it the worst two soul sucking years of my life. Not that that was his, but it's so hard to let go. And so
choices are going to be made that you won't agree with, and you might be right, you might be wrong. But regardless, I think I didn't found She Media, or She Knows Coom She Media. Like I founded Flow. I got to do all of that investment, but I have not founded something. And all the entrepreneurs I work with, it's just a different deal when people change direction or strategy or make different decisions on behalf of something you really created, like that ownership piece. I think it's different. Like it's just much harder, especially when that like your direction was what got it to a successful place. So I think entrepreneurs need to keep creating things because someone's going to fuck up your vision. So.
Right. No, for sure. I always say, second, one is I have to be an entrepreneur because if I ever work for somebody, I get fired in like 2 weeks. And two, I always say, why? I'm like, I'll never be a solo entrepreneur again. It's so lonely. It's so hard. And here I am.
Right. I mean, you're not solo because you're working with lots of people who you can collaborate with. And something I love about the podcast format is you get to have a talk that you would never schedule time for. Like, I feel like I would never be like, hey, let's catch up and spend an hour chatting about the things that are important to our industry. Like, I don't do that often enough. So good on you.
Well, listen, let's move on to, something that would be, I think it's important. I suffer from it actually, which is, I didn't know I suffered from it until probably the last 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
But it's and a lot of women talk about it, which is imposter syndrome. And I listened to one of your videos where you call it as the nasty veil.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, like you were suggesting, it's a systematic issue rather than solely an individual feeling. So I'd love for you to just dive into this for our female listeners out there, because, well, actually, not just the
Not just
female
female.
listeners, the
Yeah.
male. I posted something about this. I was like, I have imposter syndrome. I can't
Right.
believe that I feel guilty for congratulating myself on hitting this milestone, but
Yeah.
I'm like, I have angst, and I'm like,
Yeah.
why? I can't believe I did it. So
Yeah.
anyway, and all these people were like, I have it too, and it was
Yeah.
probably one of my most
Yeah, I
popular
don't
posts.
think it's just women at all. I think it's the feeling that you're not worthy or that you haven't earned your success, I think is really common. The reason yes, and my riff is that it is this sort of nasty, you're shrouded in these feelings of unworthiness. And I think calling it a syndrome, which is what I did for 10 years, makes it feel like I did something, like that's me, it's my thing, like I'm walking around feeling insecure because of some broken part of myself. And while the the indication is that you're not an imposter, it's like, oh, it's just you have an imposter syndrome, you're not an imposter, that's something that you're bringing to the party, you're actually doing great work. I like the term that I read somewhere, which was imposter phenomenon. And I like that because a lot of imposter feelings or feelings of inadequacy, I think, are not about the way you walk in a room or I walk in a room or any number of people, men and women, walk into a room. It's how you're received in that room. And I think you can, I'm sure I've inadvertently done this, made people feel like they don't belong at that table, or they aren't smart enough, or they aren't cultivated in the thing that we're studying. I think that so I think it's a dynamic. I don't think it's an individual condition, as it were. I think it's a dynamic between people that ultimately will land on one of us and cause us to feel this whole sense that you don't deserve it. It's fake. That's hence the imposter component, but it is a fake. You're a fake. It's really quite demoralizing, and I think bleeds into other aspects of your life, like feeling like I'm not worthy of being a parent or a friend or whatever. I think that it's so it really deserves discussion. But what I've asked myself to do is to sort of think about how certainly the baggage I bring to my own, there is an age thing here, by the way. I don't meet a lot of
Mhm.
Gen Zs who feel, the millennials like just think they deserve raises day one. And in my experience, I think that, so there is probably an element of Gen X in this. But I think it's what we bring to the table, but also what's sitting at the table already. Are you sitting amongst a bunch of guys who are white, heteronormative, protective of their own power? But even that's like the cliche one, probably. But are you sitting among a bunch of people who went to Ivy League schools or whose parents are, I don't know, um, all on the board at the Met or something, or people who are all from the Northeast or the South? There are all sorts of ways that we can commune to alienate people. And I think that's necessary almost, because if you to create what is a really debilitating sense of that one is an imposter.
Yep. No, all of those resonate, and I think it's one. I think the Gen X thing is absolutely. I think this is a very unique generation, especially females that are Gen
I feel like
Xers.
we give each other the head fake. We're like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yep.
Um, and it's weird because I grew up with a father who absolutely treated me like a guy, and as
Mhm.
but even just saying that, right,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
treated
yeah,
me
yeah.
like a guy.
Yeah,
It's no, he treated me with respect and wanted me to be successful,
right.
and so I always like, oh, I never think about it this way. And then I actually look back on my career and I'm like, wow, like, and then I start doubting myself. And, it's just um, this need to succeed and
Yeah,
be, and high performance. And
yeah.
then I think we also, as Gen Xers, failure was not good.
No,
No
not a
one
good
said
thing.
it's okay to
Right,
fail.
right. No, no, God. It's not like a medal for everybody. It was like You get this person's first and everybody else is last. I remember that my parents being like, with my kids, like, why are they getting awards for like going to camp, like just showing up? And I'm
Yep.
like, I know it's going to make them think they're good at everything and they're not, they're going to get out in the world and learn a different reality. So I am glad, as much as it makes me like completely nauseous, I'm glad to see instances where my kids have to deal with failure.
For sure.
I feel like that
Actually,
was all over in our generation.
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And one book, by the way, I read that actually, I think, and I have to read it again because you just have to keep rereading these things. But I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called The Four Agreements,
Yes,
and
yes, the
yeah,
program is great. That's a classic one
yeah,
to
yeah,
keep you grounded.
right. Like, don't care what other people think,
Yeah.
and be true to your, have utmost integrity in your thoughts. So, did you have a mentor or two as you were during your career? And if so, how important was that in terms of shaping where you are today?
I think I have like mentorship exists in so many relationships I have. I never had a person who I think believed they were my mentor and who had that kind of interact. Well, maybe one person who was my boss at CNET and has now gone on to do lots in our industry. Um, and I'd say in that mentorship relationship, it's more like a sort of a trust. He's always been ahead in the industry. He's very focused and has a nice, combination of purpose and profit driven work. But I don't think I've had any, I really haven't had anyone who I think believed they were my mentor and who I could kind of reach out to specifically for mentorship and that they knew that was their role. I feel like I get mentorship from so many people though, all the time. I have a lot of really smart friends, which I'm sure is we all believe and hopefully about our friends. Many of whom work in like adjacent industries or who have leadership roles in, whether it's in sustainability or ones at the CDC or or startups, lots of startup people, education. And so I learn from them whenever we have like real talks about work. Some of my friends, we stay away from work, but I learn from them all the time. But if it's, and then outside of work, like, I love playing sports. And so whether I'm, trying forever to get good at surfing or, playing a competitive tennis match, I feel like the learnings there are just perpetual as well. Like, there's so many metaphors in sports that for me just plug right into my work life. And, the way people comport themselves in sports to me is so interesting. And you just watching it and, taking the learnings on, both in terms of positive and negative behaviors, that's super helpful to me. So I feel like I have really pervasive mentorship in my life, but I couldn't say I had a mentor.
So you were very self-driven.
Driven, yeah.
Uh,
I was also driven by a community of people around me. My friends were
yeah,
all really ambitious, or
yeah.
very just into stuff. They were driven not for just success. They were like game changing, social good people. I was very unimpressive in my group because these are people who like built the High Line or started a school in the Bronx or like just did or it was created and sold a company for $500 million. So I've had the luxury of having really smart, motivated people around.
Well, I can't believe we're almost up until the top of the hour, and I just have a
Um,
couple rapid fire questions for you. And just side note, I think anyone who is an athlete, that's like my number one thing I look for when hiring salespeople.
I do
Uh,
too for salespeople, and I feel like is that okay to say that out loud? But I do.
I think that's good. It's
I know
be an
I do too.
athlete,
But like,
compete.
I also say to people, I'm like, put it on your resume. I don't care if you're like D1. Just say that like you played club lacrosse and that you freaking loved it.
Yep, absolutely. Fight, fight,
Mhm.
fight for
Right.
what for a win, even if you lose. So,
Exactly.
um, what's your favorite way to unplug?
Surfing.
And you live in Princeton?
I know
Do
it's
you-
totally landlocked Central Jersey. No, I surfing or tennis. I'd say those are my
Okay.
sports right now. They've moved, but so sports in general. And I don't equate that to just working out, which is also
Yeah.
wonderful, but different. So surfing, no, we go. My husband's a really big surfer. You might be able to see if I
I
move.
saw a surfboard there when
I'm in his office. So he is a really committed surfer. And at some point, probably about like 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I was like, well, if this is going to work out, I'm going to have to learn how to surf. And so we just had our 25th anniversary yesterday. So
oh, excellent.
pretty
Congratulations.
so far. But he, didn't grow up surfing, grew up in New York City, but started surfing really for, sanity during his residency in um, his medical residency for surgery. And then, just got really hooked. So he'd go on like 3 trips a year and then, had a house in Amagansett and then Montauk. And when we got married, I would go on the trips, but I would be kind of like, maybe I'll play around in the foam. But, about, like I said, like about 15 years ago, I started thinking this is like, I need to understand what it's like to be on the green waves and to get back, into that zone where you have so much more to play with in terms of experience. And so we go to Costa Rica usually 3 times a year. We surf on Fire Island, or he does. I'm not good at surfing there. It's very cold and there's a beach break. I don't like it. But Greg, my husband, will also go to like Mexico and probably some other trips. So they're more like big long trips, but then and
Yeah.
then in the summertime finding waves, which is always fun.
Sounds awesome. And my last question under rapid fire is what's the book on your nightstand right now?
Oh, shoot. My memory's so shot that I'm going to look it up on, I'm going to look at my Audible because I have it on Audible as well. Um, The Menopause Brain by
I'm going to get that.
Dr. Lisa Mosconi. She first wrote the XX Brain. She's a genius. So smart. And then I had Careless People, which is the book about the evils that beset Facebook. That was kind of no one talks about it because it was like they were gag ordered on PR. And then Wild Dark Shore, which is literary fiction that weaves in quite a lot of sort of noirish sustainability, sadness, not end of days, more just like the impact of global warming on
Okay.
aspects of life. So I try to mix fiction and nonfiction.
That's amazing. These are all great books. And Menopause Brain is real. So, well, thank you, Samantha, for joining us. This has been a phenomenal conversation. We're looking forward to having you at Revenue Room Salon in New York on October 7th. We've got a great lineup, by the way. It's some phenomenal people in the room. For our listeners, if today's conversation about data-driven media and AI-powered platforms resonated with you, I want to invite you to join Revenue Room Connect, our professional network for CEOs and their revenue-critical leadership teams leading businesses in the media, data, and experience economy. Please visit www.revenueroomconnect.com. Quick save the date announcement. Revved Up will be March 23 through the 24th at the Vinoy in St. Pete. Ping me on LinkedIn for more information if you're interested and want to learn more.